I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. With Shadow of the Erdtree on the horizon, I want to get all my thoughts down on the base game before we enter this new stage of development. So what does that mean? Ranking every boss in Elden Ring, of course. Now, I originally wanted to do all of this in one video, every single boss in the game all in one, but that just isn't realistic. So instead, I'll be making multiple videos over the next month, ranking the bosses via their regions. This time, it is Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula, which I've merged into one video because they're both effectively the tutorial zones of the game. Which bosses are my favourite, and which fall by the wayside? Let's find out. All 32 Limgrave bosses in Elden Ring, ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 32, we have the Soldier of Godric, the easiest boss in the series, found in the Cave of Knowledge. We love the Soldier of Godric here. He's an icon, a legend, truly the moment, and deserves all the happiness in the world. It's a shame then that he meets our Tarnished while on patrol and is immediately murdered, scoured from this land. He teaches you the basics of shielding, parrying encounters, though if you're an experienced player, he's not even gonna last 10 seconds. Rick drops 400 runes upon defeat, chump change, but at least you can say, you took down a soldier of God. Shine on, Rick, shine on. At number 31, we have the Stone Digger Troll of the Limgrave Tunnels. To be quite honest, while I can see the argument for Stone Digger Troll being higher on this list, due to his high damage output and the fact he managed to get a kill on me during my playthrough, his presence is spoiled by just how many trolls can be found across the lands between. You can find them in Stormhill, you can find them to the west of the Starting Grave in Limgrave on the way down to the Western Beach. You find them all throughout Liurnia's roads on the east, and so on and so forth. Then take into account that this boss has a high hardness stat, which forces you to two-hand whatever weapon you're using, lest your attacks keep bouncing off of his skin, and you have a tedious encounter. I've fought enough trolls to the point where the Stone Digger Troll does nothing for me. He drops the Raw Medallion, which increases the damage of raw and breath attacks by 15%, useful for anyone using the Dragon Communion incantations, for example, but not a medallion I've ever used myself. Think I might be skipping this boss next time I play. At number 30, we have the Miranda Blossom of Tombswood Cave. Immediately, the best thing about this boss is her drop. She awards you the Viridian Amber Medallion upon defeat, which boosts your maximum stamina by 11%. This is incredibly useful in the early game, as every bit of stamina matters. The fight itself is meh. Miranda is a giant flower, which means she can spread poison that you have to back away from, she can smack you with a headbutt, and she can cast an AoE of light that can be dangerous if you get cocky. She has 3 little minions in her boss room with her, but they don't even get a chance to do anything, they're that weak. Despite the small boss arena, you have ample space to avoid anything Miranda can throw at you, which will lead to a quick victory. Naturally, she's also weak to fire, so you really have no excuses to handle this boss. I barely even got to see her poison attack before she fell to my Twin Blade. A great drop, but a subpar fight that doesn't even threaten the player. At number 29, we have the Guardian Golem of the High Road Cave. Certainly a more interesting fight than the Stone Digger Troll, the Guardian Golem is an enemy you likely won't have ran into yet if you're still early on in the game. They tend to guard large structures like the Divine Bridge of Limgrave or Lanedell, the royal capital. This boss fight is a little bland for me though, simply because the cavern to reach it is so fascinating. It's filled with these creepy bat creatures, there's fun parkour, and great environmental design in the main chamber. So getting to the bottom and seeing a giant stone golem felt a bit anticlimactic. I would have loved a boss variant of those bats or something like that. You beat the boss by striking the glowing orange legs, which will eventually lead to a stagger, allowing you to either go for a visceral attack at the front, or just keep attacking the legs if you're too far away. This boss can catch players off guard like myself though, as its pommel smashes ultimately killed me on my first attempt, but that was more on my hubris as opposed to the boss's skill. The golems are incredibly easy once you understand their trick, but at least they have a cool design. This guardian golem drops the blue dancer charm, which raises physical damage with a lower equip rate, so lighter builds definitely want to have this charm in their back pocket. It's just a shame, I was hoping for something a little more interesting given the cave leading up to the boss. At number 28, we have the Cemetery Shade of the Tombswood Catacombs. Fought 3 times over the course of the game, these guys rely solely on their intense looks to terrify the player. You always find them within catacombs, which makes sense due to their relation to the dead, and initially they can seem quite threatening. With the ability to teleport away from attacks, alongside their strikes building up bleed damage, the Cemetery Shades are glass cannons that can absolutely ruin you in an instant if you're not careful. They also pull a bloodborne brainsucker on us, as they have a projectile attack that can freeze an enemy in place, allowing them to rush in for a grab attack. Now to be honest, this variant of the boss isn't that bad. Once you know the moveset, you can figure a way to counterattack, which will likely kill this boss outright due to his measly 780 HP. And as a bonus, the Tombswood Cemetery Shade drops one of the best spirit ashes in the game, Lutel the Headless, who has long been a staple favourite among the community. With so many repeat enemies, rewards can be an important way to distinguish quality of worth from each fight, and Lutel took this Cemetery Shade from 32nd to 28th. Not bad. At number 27, we have the Erdtree Burial Watchdog of the Impaler Catacombs. I really enjoy the Watchdog fights. I think the design of the bosses themselves are incredibly eerie and interesting to look at. These mechanical animations that create a real sense of horror are perfection. But this was the first boss in the game I found that was a repeat, and I remember viscerally thinking, damn, that kinda sucks. This fight has 2 distinct differences from the Limgrave Watchdog we'll talk about later. The first is that the boss has 3 faces instead of 1, which allows its fire attacks to cover a wider range. This is a cool difference I genuinely didn't know about until researching for this video, and I think it puts these bosses in a slightly new light for me. But this watchdog is joined by 4 imps in the arena, and I fucking despise the imp enemies in Elden Ring. They're small, hard to hit, agile, and do a ton of damage regardless of your point in the game. They're reskinned thralls from Dark Souls 3, only more deadly. They couldn't have the watchdog appear on its own, they had to give him friends to spice things up. I was just disappointed to see them resorting to a gank-style difficulty increase so quickly into the game when it wasn't needed. It's my least favourite form of artificial difficulty that Elden Ring does, and because it was the first time this happened to me, it gets the full brunt of my ire. And if you win, you get the demi-human ashes, which aren't really that good to begin with, as they have weak health and only succeed at drawing aggro. There are other spirits that do the same job to a far better standard. The watchdog is lucky that I love its design, otherwise it'd handily be in last place. At number 26, we have the Mad Pumpkinhead of the Waypoint Ruins. This is one of the first bosses that was discovered in the game back when the Elden Ring Network test came out, and I always thought it was a cool fight. Little did I know that Pumpkinhead enemies would be reused throughout the game, diminishing the excitement. But at least this first encounter sticks out in my mind. You have ample space in the arena to play around with, and the boss has a clear weakness to being attacked from behind that you can take advantage of. The danger is in your attacks bouncing off his metallic cranium, but you can handle that, right? His flail causes bleed buildup if you're not careful, but if you've got a decent shield, throw a few guard counters out, you'll stagger and melt this boss's health bar quick as can be. And your reward, Sorceress Sellen, an early game glintstone mage who can teach you a ton of useful glintstone sorceries for an early build. Plus, she's a fan favourite character with a really cool questline. That bumps the Pumpkinhead fight up a few notches for sure. At number 25, we have the demi-human chief duo of the Coastal Cave. This pair must be slain in order to continue Bok's questline, though it's easier said than done. The pair hit surprisingly hard and have a very strong level of aggression, combined with smaller demi-humans being littered throughout the cavern as well, and you have a fight where the tides can turn against you incredibly quickly. You're encouraged to sneak around at the start of the fight so you can get some early damage on your targets, and luckily they stagger easily, meaning if you can avoid the mosh pit of smaller enemies, you can kill the first chief relatively quickly. I wasn't prepared for their aggression at all though, and I still heavily dislike the use of regular enemies to make the battle harder. But at least here it makes sense with what the story of the fight is. You're carving your way through this community at Bock's behest. They all deserve what's coming to them. They drop the tailoring tools and the sewing needle, the former allowing you to make adjustments to your clothing, the latter progressing Bock's questline. But more importantly, this boss is guarding the path to Limgrave's Dragon Communion Island, unlocking Dragon Communion incantations for your playthrough, assuming you don't go to the one in Caelid instead. This boss was tougher than I remembered, and for that, it isn't bottom 5 on today's list. Cool. At number 24, we have the Scaly Misbegotten of Morn Tunnel. A boss I actually feel quite bad for because he's incredibly easy. He attacks with a large great axe that has deliberately slow swings you can either roll through or defend. For me, I blocked his attacks, guard countered, and was able to stagger the boss near immediately, leading to an almost instant win for me as the player. But ignoring the gameplay, which was simple with my build, I just appreciate that this is a boss that actually makes sense. The Weeping Peninsula used the Misbegotten as slaves, so finding one at the depths of Morn Tunnel, likely being forced to mine for smithing stones, unaware of the battle raging at Castle Morn, is pretty fitting. Plus, this guy drops the Rusted Anchor, which was a personal favourite early game strength weapon. It does great damage, and its basic weapon skill, Barbaric Roar, buffs your damage and strength scaling for 40 seconds. Pair that with the Roar Talisman mentioned in our previous entry, and you can boost heavy attack damage to 15%. That's pretty good. And all this from a fairly easy to kill boss? Worth it. At number 23, we have the Rune Bear of Earthbore Cave. One of the more infamous early game fights, Rune Bears are tough as nails when you've not got the stats to survive their aggressive attacks. And yet that's also what makes them memorable to me. There's nothing more terrifying than when patches warps you into the Rune Bear Forest in Eastern Limgrave. Similarly, there's nothing more terrifying than entering a boss fog to see a large Rune Bear in the corner. He drops the Spelldrake Talisman upon defeat, which is a rather useful tool, as it reduces your magic damage taken by 13%. Not sure why a Rune Bear has it, but I digress. This boss is unrelenting. Blocking won't help due to its 3-hit claw swipe combo, and its extremely fast-acting forward charge. There's also its grab attack, which is heavily telegraphed, but you're in the wrong spot or caught up in an animation, you're gonna get snatched up regardless. This was one of the few fights that actually had me on the edge of my seat, as even though I came here with a well-leveled character, the Rune Bear had me on the back foot the entire time. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes I want a boss or two that just hands me my ass and humbles me while still allowing me to win the fight. Rune Bear won't be winning any awards, but he's a solid encounter. At number 22, we have the Ulcerated Tree Spirit of the Fringe Folk Hero's Grave. I recently talked about this fight in my Ulcerated Tree Spirit ranking video, linked down below, and I was honestly very high on its placement. It's one of the first tree spirits you can encounter in the game, and is a solid challenge if you choose to fight it early on in your playthrough. It has all the usual pitfalls of a tree spirit, awful camera, crazy movement, hard to read animations, but like the Rune Bear from our prior entry, it's purposefully harder than the average Limgrave bosses so it can test you. After all, the hero's grave is locked by 2 stone sword keys. It drops the Banished Knight Oleg summon, which is considered one of the better spirit ashes in the game, so it's well worth the visit to pick him up. Though if you're not using spirit summons to begin with, you also get a golden seed out of it, plus the Erdtree's Favor Talisman is hidden in the Fringe Folk Hero's Grave dungeon. Suddenly, the Ulcerated Tree Spirit is looking a little sexier. At number 21, we have the Beastman of Faramazula, found in the Groveside Cave. This is likely the first boss players will face after heading out into Limgrave, Tree Sentinel not included. The cavern is to the left of the forest leading to the Stormhill Gate, and contains just one room filled with wolves before you reach the boss. What I like about the Beastman is that he's actually pretty tough. He's got a wide variety of moves at his disposal, does good damage to your HP and stamina, and he's got a decent pool of HP that makes him feel threatening. Now yes, most of his attacks are parryable, not something I've dabbled much with in Elden Ring, but no doubt I'll learn to parry all over again in a future playthrough. but I like fighting this guy head on, dodging combos, circle strafing, taking shots, backing away, etc, etc. He drops the Flame Drake talisman upon defeat, which reduces fire damage taken by 13%, always a useful talisman to have active in the early game, especially for Godric. More than anything else though, I love that they reference Farum Azula so early into the game. This is a late game location, and his species are all regular enemies there, so seeing one so far away from home having fallen into the lands between, well, it raises a lot of questions for the player that eventually get answers. Love it. At number 20, we have the Deathbird of Stormhill. There's something very special about exploring Elden Ring at night, only to be accosted by an enemy that only appears in the dark. The regular Deathbirds cannot wield magic, and thus have to use their pokers and physical features to do damage. And thank God, because if they could do magic, we'd be in for a world of hurt. I really like these enemies. They look horrific, they appear out of nowhere, and they're incredibly satisfying to fight and take down. I found that blocking the poker strikes and guard countering worked incredibly well for this specific variant. The only move I found dangerous was the Deathblight Shriek. I'll never be a fan of instant kill status effects, but at least with the Deathbird, it's a quick move that won't build up your meter in one go, so I can forgive and forget. This boss drops the Blue Feathered Branch Sword talisman upon defeat, which reduces the damage a player takes by 50% when HP is below 20%. A great way to give yourself a chance to recover when on low health in a battle or boss fight. Anyway, shall we knock out the other Deathbird too? At number 19, we have the Deathbird of the Weeping Peninsula. Found on the cliffs to the west of the ramparts leading to Castle Morn, kill that giant archer golem in this area before attempting this fight unless you want arrows piercing you at every opportunity. Or don't, maybe it'll hit the Deathbird. That's gotcha for you, baby. This Deathbird is the same as the previous entry, with the exception that it's a little bit stronger and is fought on a slightly more uneven part of the environment. I definitely struggled with this fight. My strategy of guard countering the head wasn't working as cleanly as I'd have liked, and there are a few bat enemies who can appear from nearby if you're not careful. There's nothing more to say about this fight I haven't already said, so let's look at its drop. The Sacrificial Axe, which isn't the most outstanding weapon on the surface, has the unique property to restore 4 FP every time an enemy is killed near the player while equipped. Combine this with the Sword of Milos and the Ancestral Spirit's Horn, and you can create an infinite FP build. I'm sure people have figured that one out already. At number 18, we have the Grafted Scion, the opening boss of the Chapel of Anticipation. Long-term viewers know I'm not the biggest fan of this fight. As a tutorial boss, it fails to achieve the same results as other classics like Vanguard or Udex Gundyr. It's a fight you're supposed to lose, but has such an overwhelming moveset, there's no real opportunity to win. What I liked about Vanguard from Demon Souls is that despite having the same gimmick, you only get one shot at the start of the game, its moveset was slower, more telegraphed, and gave the player hope that they could win the fight. You just don't really get that with Grafted Scion. Maybe experienced players who have sunk hundreds of hours can achieve it, but I know I can't. The rematch, though, is a lot of fun. You have to head to the 4 Belfries in Liurnia and unlock one of the warps to return here. Defeating the Grafted Scion after having experienced so much on your journey is satisfying, a real look how far we've come moment for the player. You're rewarded with the Ornamental Straight Sword and the Golden Beast Crest Shield upon defeating this boss, either at the start of the game or later. The Straight Sword is a good weapon, the shield is a decent Great Shield, I haven't messed around with either of them myself, but from certain past videos I know that people feel very strongly about the Grafted Scion's drops. I don't know, I like the concept of revisiting a tough fight. I just dislike the execution of the initial encounter, but that's just me. At number 17, we have the Knights Cavalry in Limgrave. Found at night across the large bridge in the center of the zone, you'll have to battle a dark-cloaked rider on horseback, dodging attacks and whittling the health of his steed down so you can knock him off, get a visceral, and claim victory. I actually really like the Knights Cavalry bosses. They're a little overused, but are one of the few fights that use enemy horse mechanics. Imagine if we could defeat the horses of the Tree Sentinels, I wish. You'd think using Torrent is the way to go here, a jousting battle against 2 riders, but no, Torrent is honestly a liability here. It's far easier to avoid the knight's attacks from the ground. The only issue with this arena is the abundance of regular enemies on either side of the bridge, which are more than happy to wander in and attack the player. Knight's cavalry bosses are at their best solo, as you need to have full focus on their movement and their attacks to avoid them. Getting murked by a regular soldier while trying to follow the Dark Riders is not quite as much fun. They can revive their horse after being knocked off for a short while, so get as much damage on them while they're on the ground and don't get complacent. Now, this cavalry drops the Repeating Thrust Ash of War, which is fine, I guess. Admittedly, haven't dabbled much in Ashes of War. Call me a purist, I tend to enjoy a weapon's base skills, and once you obtain rare boss weapons or legendaries, Ashes of War lose their relevance. They should try to gain relevance, like my channel, which is trying to reach 35,000 subscribers by the end of the year. After finishing this video, if you like what you watched, consider parrying that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future content. Or go the extra mile and become a channel member. You'll get 24-hour early access to future videos, as well as a shout out at the end of each video and in the description. Thanks for listening. At number 16, we have the Tibia Mariner found in Summonwater Village. The first Mariner boss players will find in Elden Ring. I have a soft fondness for these guys, even if they're not particularly difficult. You have to hunt them all down to claim their death route for Gerank's questline, and this boss also drops the Skeletal Militiaman Ashes, which, while not the most exciting summon, can survive a while due to the skeleton's unique ability to respawn. The Tibia Mariner itself is a very passive creature. It'll teleport around the village, attempting to summon skeletons to attack you in its stead. When you're up close, it can use a fun variety of water-based moves with its boat, such as attempting to slam you from on high, or creating a wave that can crash against the player. His melee weapon is a large horn that he can swing or use to summon more allies to help in the fight. I don't know, I just love the goofy design of this guy. He's just on his little boat chilling, he doesn't teleport too far away unlike some of the other mariners in the game, and feels like a very chill and unique mini-boss in the grand scheme of things. Not all enemies need to be hulking beasts or terrifying knights. Just a silly skelly bro in his little boat is more than enough for me. At number 15, we have the Grave Warden Duelist of the Murkwater Catacombs. Honestly, I'm shocked that the duelists weren't spammed more often in the game. Yes, there are alternate variants you can find, including some putrid editions in later areas, but overall, this singular Grave Warden duelist is the only one you'll be encountering in the early game. He wields a pair of hammers, chains draping beneath him, and attacks with a ferocity befitting of a duelist. I love the touch that when you enter the boss arena, he's cloaked up, but immediately tosses it to the side in the most anime move ever once he spots you. His grab is terrifying as he picks you up by the neck and yeets you across the arena like a man swatting a mosquito, and beware if he starts swinging around his chains, his range triples in size for a brief move that can stagger you, allowing him to land a jump attack. But he's got a few weaknesses. He's very slow at making up distance, so it's easy to run away and heal. That, and his attacks are very easy to shield through. They don't do as much stamina damage as you'd expect, so it's simple to hit him with a guard counter that staggers him out of his attack animations. Lastly, he can be backstabbed, and that truly is the death knell that gives players the advantage. Defeating him gets you the Banished Knight Engvall Spirit Ashes, the weaker of the 2 Limgrave Banished Knights that you can obtain, but still an extremely solid Spirit Ash to break out when in danger. Engvall was the Spirit Ash that my partner carried during his Elden Ring playthrough, and he never steered him wrong. Fitting that he's guarded by such a cool boss. At number 14, we have Patches, found in Murkwater Cave. I don't believe I need to introduce this iconic Soulsborne character to you all, but this is our first time getting to officially fight him as a boss. Patches will ambush you when you go to check the chest at the back of his boss room, which honestly, fair play to him, we are robbing him in his own house. His shield and spear build was just the right level of irritating for me in my first playthrough that I actually struggled to fight him. I didn't have a way to break his guard and I wasn't confident in my ability to parry. So Patches could just poke again until I was defeated. In hindsight, super embarrassing. This time around, I realized I could just backstab the guy until he groveled for mercy, ending the fight. You can kill him, but I find his questline to be very nuanced and worth pursuing. I think the novelty of officially fighting this character in boss form is what brings it so high on today's list. I love Patches, and that moment of finding him for the first time brought a smile to my face, even if I knew he was going to extort and ruin me any chance he could. Can't say my boyfriend had the same reaction. I had to beg him not to murder Patches so he could see his questline. He hates him that much. Heartbreaking scenes, let me tell you. Killing Patches gives you his bell bearing, but that doesn't mean much if you've yet to access the Round Table Hold, meaning you'd be locking yourself out of getting Margit's Shackle. See, Patches is useful alive. At number 13, we have the Erdtree Burial Watchdog of the Stormfoot Catacombs. Likely the first catacomb that players will come across as it's hidden on the cliffs behind the starting church, the Erdtree Burial Watchdog sets a terrifying tone. As I explained in the last Watchdog entry, I really love their designs. They're mechanical in their movements, but with this janky puppet-like energy. Their attacks aren't easy to initially predict, as they can slam their greatswords down with precision and speed. And once they break out the fire, you've got to put some distance and circle strafe like your life depends on it to survive. This is the basic Watchdog with just one head and no extra bells and whistles like magic, so it's just you learning a simple moveset so you can come out on top. He's probably my favourite of the Watchdogs, purely because there's nothing that beats your first time encountering them, and he's not flanked by enemies, or using elemental attacks that I'm not prepared for yet. Though his drop leaves a lot to be desired. He gives you the Noble Sorcerer Ashes, aka the worst Spirit Ash in the game. He walks extremely slow, shoots a single glintstone pebble, and dies almost immediately. Thank God the Erdtree Burial Watchdog is so cool. I said that for its last entry too, is this becoming a theme? At number 12, we have the Black Knife Assassin found in the Death-Touched Catacombs. The first of the assassins we face during the game, I'm still surprised that they're willing to let the player face such a dangerous foe so quickly into your adventure. Black Knife Assassins are those who carried out the killing of Godwyn, and now remain across the lands between, dangerous to encounter. This specific fight has us facing a weakened variant with half health and far easier to read combos. There's also a lack of red flame attacks that the other assassins can all use. Basically, she's been nerfed, while still retaining decent damage and aggression to show you that even at half health, you have to be wary when dealing with these assassins. For me, guard countering and hitting her out of her attacks was the way to go. This boss staggers frequently, and despite her fast movement that keeps her out of range, she'll always take the initiative to close distance. This means you can always control the energy of the fight to come out victorious. She drops the assassin's Crimson Dagger Talisman upon defeat, which can be used to regain HP upon hitting a critical attack. I'm certain there are builds out there that could very much use this to great effect. Just a solid fight, and you get a death route for your troubles too. At number 11, we have the Knight's Cavalry, found at the Weeping Peninsula. Unlike the Limgrave variant, this Knight's Cavalry is found alone, no enemies in sight, allowing for a nice relaxing 1v1 duel right next to a Site of Grace. How useful. It also wields the Knight Rider Flail instead of the Glaive, and even drops said flail for the player upon its defeat, which instantly makes it a far more valuable boss fight than its Limgrave bestie. It also drops the Barricade Shield Ash of War, which grants your shield tier 4 hardness for 10 seconds, and halves the amount of stamina needed to block attacks. Tasty for a shield build. The strategy for this boss is still the same: bait the boss into attacking, wait for a safe combo, punish, rinse and repeat until the horse goes down. The danger with the flail is that even while you're blocking it with your shield, you'll still take an amount of bleed buildup, so you have to watch just how much you're blocking versus dodging, lest you accidentally let the meter fill. A rogue bleed proc would be disastrous against any early game boss, but especially a Knight's Cavalry. Get him on the ground though, and he becomes useless. His attacks are slow and easy to roll through, and he can be backstabbed. The challenge is always in killing the horse with these early cavalries that don't have the HP to resummon. A really fun fight though. At number 10, we have the Ancient Hero of Zamor, found in the Weeping Everjail. We're reaching the heavy hitter bosses now. The Ancient Hero of Zamor is a late game enemy that only appears in the early game due to this Everjail. The first half of the fight features a lot of curved sword combos. You can block them with a decent amount of stamina. though it'll likely be a risky endeavour. I used guard counters in an attempt to stun the opponent so I could get a visceral, which worked wonders down the line. But then the frost comes out. Every attack now does frostbite buildup and frost damage. He gains the ability to use a quick AoE that blasts players back, plus a giant frost tornado AoE that you've got to run away from. And to add to that, he has Sister Fried's Ice Breath attack from Dark Souls 3, which leaves a trail of frost along the floor that builds up the frostbite. This is a boss that has a very weak first half of the fight, leaving you thinking, oh, this'll be easy, until it ups the ante in the second half to try and finish you off. He drops Radagon's Scar Seal as a reward, an exceptionally valuable early game talisman, as it raises your vigor, endurance, strength, and dexterity levels by 3 when equipped, for just a 10% damage buff. That's nothing in the grand scheme of things. A fight that rewards you handsomely in return, how could I ask for anything else? At number 9, we have Bloodhound Knight Darrowil, found in the Forlorn Hound Everjail. This fight ranks highly not because of the boss itself, but because the story surrounding it. Ah yes, Bloodhound Knights are fun to fight, and taking this guy on alone can be brutal due to his bleed build-up and aggressive attacks, but take on Blythe's questline and you can summon the wolf to help you when you attempt this Everjail. It trivializes the fight as Darrowil won't know where to split his aggro, but getting to team up with your best wolf friend, who, according to the manga, is canonically awful at directions, is perfection. Darrowil drops his weapon, the Bloodhound's Fang, upon defeat, which is a solid weapon due to its bleed build-up and its skill, Bloodhound's Finesse, that can give you a lot of distance with its first upward slash, which somersaults you away from your opponent, and then if you press the attack button again, you can dash inwards with a fast step attack. It's a really nice reward for a cool Everjail fight. Some may argue it's a bit easy or not as memorable as other entries, but I tend to value a well-told story or character questline over difficulty any day. At number 8, we have the Leonine Misbegotten fight from Castle Morn. When compared to most of the main fights in Elden Ring, the Leonine Misbegotten falls a bit short of his potential, but in a sea filled with field bosses, I actually think he's a pretty good fight who does exactly what he's supposed to. Feel threatening upon a first run, with some surprisingly aggressive attacks that keep the player on the back foot as they attempt to either block or dodge while managing their stamina. He staggers relatively easily, so if you strike first you can knock him out of his combos, but fail to do so and you'll be on the end of a fairly brutal series of wombo combos that will have you taking a shocking amount of damage from this guy's sword. Love his arena, feels very threatening and unique compared to the rest of the game. I almost wish he was wielding the grafted sword though, just so it could feel like we're fighting this creature for his weapon, as the grafted sword ends up being a fairly useful, if absolutely ugly early game weapon due to its skill Oath of Vengeance, which boosts all your attributes by 5 for 60 seconds. He's a real challenge for shield builds, as you just won't have the stamina to survive his onslaught, but his fairly frail HP pool and easy to stagger and stun nature means it's simple to turn the tides. A frenetic, fast-paced fight that I always enjoy every time I play. At number 7, we have the Warmaster's Shack Bell-Bearing Hunter. Elemer of the Briar is one of my favourite optional bosses in the game, and knowing I get to fight him multiple times over due to the Bell-Bearing Hunters is always a pleasure. The Warmaster's Shack variant is, for me, the second hardest of his optional encounters, as it's the one you'll run into first. He replaces Banal and will attack the player if they approach the shack. Terrifying upon a first appearance, I absolutely loved taking this guy on while not being able to remember his moveset for the life of me. His ability to use the Force to swing his sword makes him deadly at close and long range, so there's no real safety during the fight, especially if he decides to use his shield bash forwards, which has an insane range of wherever you are on the battlefield. How fun. You can use the environment like the shack to try and block line of sight for a heal, but the challenge will come from needing to take him down as quickly as possible so you're not put onto the back foot. Staying close and getting hits where you can was my best strategy. Once you're trading blows, you've already lost. He drops the Bone Peddler Bell Bearing upon defeat, which allows the purchase of thin and hefty beast bones, useful for crafting arrows for a ranged bow build, so he's worth taking on. I fought him after Godric, and still found him a relative challenge, but was able to eventually come out on top. The fact that it came down to all my healing items being used was a fun plus though, great balancing. At number 6, we have the Erdtree avatar found at the Weeping Peninsula. I've already talked about this fight recently in my Erdtree avatar ranking video, but to make a long story short, I think this evolution of the Vanguard Demon moveset from Demon Souls has gone as far as it can go. This was the perfect conclusion for this enemy type, as we have our usual slow swings and combos to avoid, plus the addition of some crazy holy magic attacks that catch new players off guard. There's nothing more energizing than running from holy blasts as they attempt to catch you out and snipe you from afar. Plus, this boss drops 2 extremely valuable tiers for the Flask of Wondrous Physic. The Opaline Bubble tier, My Baby, which raises your defense by 90% until you take your next hit, allowing you to effectively tank any attack of your choice without consequence, and the Crimson Burst Bubble tier, which gives you a passive HP regeneration effect. They're both useful, you can't deny it. What can I say about the Erdtree avatars that I haven't already said in my past videos? Amazing designs, really fun battles with a solid, varied moveset that feels learnable and not too difficult that players get frustrated, everything you'd want from a boss that's designed to give important physic upgrades. At number 5, we have Flying Dragon Aaviier, found at Lake Aaviier. While I know the general fanbase isn't the biggest fan of the dragon fights in Elden Ring, as they all start to feel a bit samey after a while, nobody can deny that the first time you run into Aaviier is an absolutely badass moment. You approach a series of cultists only for the dragon to launch from the sky and crush them beneath his feet, the fight beginning in earnest. There aren't a lot of bosses where Torrent is actually a viable strategy to help defeating them, but the dragons are where I think Torrent shines the best. His fast movement allows you to get out of the way in case of AoEs, such as with Exeeks and Kaled, and he allows you to catch up to your opponents if they fly too far away. Aaviier has a wide range of fire breath attacks, which all have simple dodging strategies once you've experienced them a few times. There's the classic dragon slams you need to be moving away from to avoid, and the bites, stomps, and claw swipes. He can also be fought on foot if you prefer that, though it makes avoiding some of the fire breath attacks very difficult. I must also warn you that my footage will cause professional Elden Ring players to cringe, because when I did my Dragon Rankings videos earlier in the year, I had so many comments critiquing my fighting style. My response? Get the fuck over it. People play badly, people will play worse than you. I am a casual channel. I'm not professional or knowledgeable about these games to the extent of other Souls YouTubers, and I'm more than okay with that. You need to be as well. Aaviier was the first moment in Elden Ring where I truly felt excitement over what I could face in the lands between, and I ended up enjoying every other dragon fight that followed as well. Sue me. At number 4, we have the Crucible Knight at the Stormhill Everjail. To be perfectly honest, I just like Crucible Knights. They're extremely tough to learn, they have varied movesets with a lot of combo potential and not a lot of downtime to get attacks in. You have to make your own moments as opposed to waiting for the enemies to give you theirs. And this first Crucible Knight is but a taste of the rest of those fuckers hiding around the lands between. The first half of the fight is about understanding his sword and shield moveset, figuring out which attacks can be punished, and reacting accordingly. The second half of the fight is about adapting to the Erdtree incantations that each Crucible Knight knows. Every Crucible Knight knows how to perform the winged dive bomb attack, so getting used to the dodge timing there is valuable, and the Stormhill Crucible Knight also knows the tailspin incantations, the regular and great tailspin which is comboed into from a flying dive. Learning these movesets, figuring out your strategies, not getting greedy, and overcoming the odds to come out on top is what makes Soulsborne games so much fun. And nothing in the early game required me to formulate a strategy more than the Crucible Knight of the Everjail. Plus, you get the aspect of the Crucible Tail incantation upon its defeat, allowing you too to access your inner Scaly. How exciting. At number 3, we have the Tree Sentinel found near the starting grave of Limgrave. While Aaviier and the Crucible Knight are both powerful foes that you can overcome, there's nothing more memorable than walking out of your starting crypt, seeing a rider on horseback, approaching, and then getting absolutely wrecked immediately. The Tree Sentinel is the perfect early game battle to test how far you've come. He requires you to get up close and personal to survive, as his shield reflects magic. Sometimes I've got better luck at this fight when on Torrent, as I can just drive by the Sentinel with chip damage until I come out on top. Other times I've had better luck on foot, blocking attacks and rolling out of the way of some of the harder hitting strikes. But no matter the variation, I've always found that being aggressive is what gets me killed. This is a battle of patience, of letting the Sentinel make the first move, and capitalizing on his mistakes. In his enraged state though, he does gain some brutal shield attacks that cause major AoE damage you wouldn't expect. He's able to catch players off guard and feel powerful due to his ability to shut down ranged magic combat. He's the ultimate early game challenge and makes his presence known at the start of your journey, so you'll always have him at the back of your mind. Taking him down earlier and earlier in each playthrough and obtaining his golden halberd feels oh so good. A weapon that has high strength requirements, but a ton of reach and a great addition for any faith build. Plus the skill, Golden Vow, gives you attack and defense buffs for 45 seconds. I'd say that's worth it. Of the regular field bosses, Tree Sentinel tops the list, only beaten by the very obvious pair chilling at Stormveil. At number 2, we have Margit the Fell Omen. Ever since my last ranking on this game, I've come around to Margit a little bit. I already found him to be an incredibly fun and engaging boss fight, but the fact he's arguably much harder than Godric makes him being the Guardian of Stormveil a bit of an odd choice. Sure, defeating him means you can handle Stormveil no problem, but the players aren't going to know that going in, so they might be expecting something tougher. Either way, on his own, Margit is a fabulous fight. He starts off with some simple combos of his staff to keep you on your toes. He's got daggers, which are often used to cancel your healing, as this boss is very good at input reading. And if you're behind him, beware of that tail, it's not for show. Margit's main challenge comes from his enraged state, where he gains the ability to conjure a true smorgasbord of holy weapons to rain down pain on your poor Tarnished. He'll switch between his staff, his sword, and his new hammer to combo you into oblivion. You have to find the punishable windows and take him down as quickly as possible. His health isn't as large a pool as you'd expect, something that remains true even for his late game Morgoth fight. But you've got the skills to succeed here, it's just overwhelming to start with. There are some attacks that are almost unavoidable though, so I can't imagine doing a no damage run against Margit. I've seen videos of people going through that trauma, and I would rather just not. At least if you're a magic build, you've got range to attack him back. It's melee users who have to be careful. Obviously, you can summon if he's too tough, as his AI can't really handle aggroing onto 2 targets, often giving you the chance to get a lot of damage from behind. But he's totally doable solo with a bit of time and practice. And you get a talisman pouch for your troubles. How sweet. He just couldn't hold a candle to our number 1. At number 1, we have Godric the Grafted, the Lord of Stormveil Castle, and in my opinion, one of the best balanced bosses in the game. Godric is meant to be the first shard bearer you face, so as such, taking him on early means you won't be terribly strong when you reach him in Stormveil. Yet he somehow manages to be a fight that plays around perfectly with player health, always doing attacks that damage but don't outright one-shot, always being dodgeable, except for his one cyclone attack that's a bit unfair, and his phase 2, at least to me, is more slow than his phase 1 due to the giant dragon arm he's having to carry. I love the attacks where he rolls towards you like a crazed bowling ball, giving you ample opportunity to time a dodge and punish. He can attack you with wind slices, combo you with his axe, and do his classic command, kneel, where he slams his axe into the ground to create AoE shockwaves you have to jump to avoid. In phase 2, most of his attacks are reefed in Dragon's Flame, such as his Cyclone. He's got a grab that sweeps you up and slams you to the ground while cooking you with fire. He's got a stronger variant of his kneel attack that has an insanely large shockwave. He can drag his dragon mouth across the ground in a circle to rain fire down on his opponents, and most dangerously for me, he can walk towards you, breathing fire in a cone that lasts for far longer than you'd expect, and has an extremely wide and distant hitbox that can have you cornered if he uses it at a bad spot in the arena. And yet he's still just so much fun to fight. His music is on point, this bombastic theme that nobody will forget thanks to his energetic and powerful displays. That mid-phase cutscene is absolutely iconic, and Godric comes off as one of the most memorable bosses in the game despite being such an early roadblock who's easily forgotten as the game progresses. Yet still he is remembered, and even ripped off as Godfroy, the worthy ruler of Limgrave. And that's my list. Which Limgrave bosses did you enjoy the most? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord. My Twitter for sure is the best place to go. A massive shout out to all of my current channel members. Thank you so much for your support, you're amazing. If you want to become a channel member, it is $4.99, there is a link in the description. Consider it, it helps keep the channel alive. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time. Adios.